Hi everybody, it's Chef Christy and I'm here in my kitchen quarantined with everybody else, and I've got a whole bunch of dried beans and I've gotten some questions about what to do with beans. So I'm going to make some different dishes today. I'm going to start with my white navy beans right there. I'm going to soak them overnight, and then I'm going to cook 3 different dishes that might be a little different from what you're used to doing with them, and hopefully you'll really enjoy them. So here I have my dried white beans, and I'm going to soak these in water overnight so that they soften up and make them ready for cooking tomorrow. Okay, so there's 2 cups of beans and 4 to 6 cups of water, and I'm just gonna throw a cloth over that and let that sit on the counter overnight and let those beans soak. To flavor my first cooking of the beans, this is actually a vegetarian flavoring. I want sort of a neutral flavor because I'm going to do 3 different things with the beans, and everything else is going to have its own flavor profile, so I just want to give a basic seasoning to the beans. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a bouquet garni, which is a little pouch that I'm going to put all my aromatics in. And right now I've got some bay leaves, I've got some cracked black peppercorn, I've got some roughly chunked up garlic, and I've got some Italian seasoning because I don't have any just plain thyme here, and I'm substituting because it's a quarantine kitchen. So the other aromatics that I'm going to put in are parsley stems, and I have separated my parsley leaves. Get that in there. There we go, parsley leaves, because I'm going to chop those up and use them later. But for the aromatic part of this, see the cutting board, I'm just going to use the stems. So I'm going to cut those up one more time so they fit into my little bouquet garni. I'm going to chunk those in here together. There's a lot of flavor in the stems, and if you're buying organic, which these are organic, then you want to get all that flavor. Get your money's worth. And then the other thing I'm going to throw in here is I cleaned off some green onions. See, I've got these little sprouts, and they were getting a little aged, and they had a lot of dried extra skin on the outside, so I cut those off. I don't have any leeks, so this is going to be my little bit of allium flavoring. I have really overstuffed my bouquet garni. Hopefully I can get all that closed. I've got a piece of string here. I guess I'm not using that right now. A little pouch. I'm going to try and gather up on my little edges. Luckily that's a lot of air in there, so hopefully I'll be able to squish it down. Now if you are quarantined with someone else, this would be a great time to get them to help, because they could, you know, wrap the little string around there for you while you were holding everything closed. But the dog nor the cat has opposable thumbs, so they're not really much help in this situation. There we go. Get that kind of squished down. All right, so I'm going to do this one-handed. Wrap that around there. Tie that off, and then I'm going to let that cook right in with the beans. And then when the first cooking of the beans are done, I'm going to take that out, throw that away, and then I will add a repeat of some of those flavors. Green onions and garlic and onions will definitely make an appearance again, but this is just for that first flavoring. I'm going to make 3 different things out of these beans, so I don't want to give anything too characteristic to this first batch. So there we go. It's not the prettiest, but it's got all those parsley stems in there, so it's a little lumpy looking, things sticking out. But this is my bouquet garni that's going to go into the beans in the first batch of cooking. My beans have been soaking overnight, and there they are. I had to add a little bit more water because they had absorbed everything I had put in. That's the 2 cups of beans that I put in there last night, and they've been soaking overnight in room temperature water, and they have swelled up a little bit, and so now they are ready to cook. Here are our beans. They've been soaking overnight, and they've had the first soaking water poured off. That water is now full of a sugar called raffinose, which is what makes beans known as the musical fruit. It doesn't digest well for us, and so it causes some gas, and that's what makes beans go toot. So I pour that one off. I'm going to pour some cold water over this and get the cooking process started. Other ways that you can help with that, if that's a particular problem for you, is you can cook your beans with a little kombu sea vegetable. That helps reduce that gas, that gaseous probability for beans. And another thing you can do is right towards the end, before you serve it, after you've taken it off the heat, you can stir in a little Beano, and that's a digestive enzyme that helps you deal with that as well. So those kind of enzymes out of kombu, just pouring off the soaking water, things like that can all help. So I'm going to pour in some fresh filtered water, and I want to make a lot of bean stock with this, because the cassoulet that I'm going to make requires a lot of extra broth. So I don't want to just cook my beans into the right amount of water and have them soak it all up. I want to have a lot of extra broth, and I want to make a nice flavorful broth. So I'm going to give it plenty of room to grow. See all that foam? That's protein forming on the top, and one of the things that we're going to want to do is kind of skim the scum as we go along. Here's my bouquet garni with my lumpy parsley stems. I'm going to submerge that. The one thing I'm not putting in here at this point is salt, because I don't want my stock to get too salty. I don't want the beans to be tough, and sometimes when they cook in salted water they can be a little tough. Always add salt at the end on beans. So I'm now going to turn the heat, let that come up to a boil, and then I'm going to put it on my simmer burner and let that simmer for an hour and a half or so. Let's see if that's true. Right now it's 2:23 on Saturday afternoon. So let's see if an hour and a half from now would be 4 o'clock or so. We're going to shoot for that, and this is the first cooking of the beans to get them to a tender state. From here I'm going to divide them into different categories and cook different things with them. One of them is going to be a raw salad, cold salad, so I want my beans to be just tender, but to hold up when I toss them with other vegetables and a dressing. I'm going to make a pureed dip with some of them, so that's going to need to have the beans to be tender enough so that they'll make a smooth paste. And then I'm going to make a cassoulet, which is going to bake for another couple hours, so I want the beans to get to their final really soft texture in that. So I'm just going to the just past al dente stage with the beans at this point, so that they're edible at that stage, but still have some way to go and cook. All right. I can just hear the Instapot users chiming in at this point going, this is where I'd use the Instapot. You're right. This is where you would use your Instapot if you have one and you love it. And I know if you do, that you do. I understand that Instapot users have a special thing, like me and my refrigerator. But yeah, if you've got an Instapot, definitely get your beans cooked to the point where they're tender in the Instapot. Now, after that point, especially with the cassoulet, we want a long, slow bake to develop some flavors. So we're going to go out of the Instapot at that point and start using a casserole dish in the oven. But there's no reason, if you wanted to, you couldn't use your Instapot to this point. If you really wanted to, you could use canned beans too. But we're taking these beans from their dried state all the way through to some different cooked options. So this point is the low and slow on the stove. Or, yes, you can certainly cut some time with this step by bringing out the Instapot and cooking your dried beans. All right, so here we are. It's a little after 4 o'clock. It's 4:18. I had to do a little shifting things around. One of the things, the pot that I was using had a little leak, so I had to change pots. And I tried to use my simmer burner, and it was so low that it wasn't really cooking, so I had to move it over here. I've been taking the time while the beans cooked to read my owner's manual on my gas range. And so now I've got beans that are to that just on this side of al dente doneness, which is what I want. Here's my bouquet garni, which has been flavoring the water. I can stir my beans around. They still have all of their shape to them. They haven't started breaking down, haven't started getting mushy. That's exactly where I want them to be. So I'm going to cut this off now. And I'm going to strain the beans away from the stalk, but I'm going to reserve that stalk because I want to use that for stuff later on. So here we are with cooked beans. There's my cooked beans. There's my little bouquet garni that I can now toss. Ooh, that's very hot. And there's my bean stock that we're going to use for other stuff here in just a little bit. So I have cooked my beans. This was the 2 cups of beans that I started soaking last night. And this is 2 cups of cooked beans. And that's about 14 ounces, a little bit shy of 2 cups of cooked beans. I wanted to go with approximately the same amount that would be in a can of beans, and that is a cup of beans. So all of that came out of those 2 cups of dried beans. And in my pot over here, I have got some bacon. The meats that you can use for cassoulet include pork belly and bacon and ham and things like that. What I had in my freezer was bacon. So I'm sauteing off that right now and get a little color on that, get some oil out of it. And then I'm going to saute my other meat and move on with my cassoulet. Here we've got some skinless chicken thighs, sauteing off, getting nice golden brown and delicious before they go into the bean cassoulet. Here we are, we're going to make cassoulet. This is a peasant dish from the south of France. And it's a wonderful way to use up those dried beans that we've been soaking and pre-cooking. So here I've got my 2 cups of dried beans that soaked overnight. They cooked in a flavorful liquid with garlic and some black peppercorn and other aromatics, bay leaves and that sort of thing. And then I drained them, and that's the cooking liquid. Doesn't that look delicious? And so those are the first 2 parts of our cassoulet. Now, like I said, this is a peasant food, and as such, it doesn't have a set group of ingredients. It has a basic technique, and I want to share that with you. So the components are the beans and the broth and the meats. Now, meats on this can vary from pork skin, smoked ham, chicken, goose, duck confit, pork belly, link sausage. Julia Child's recipe calls for lamb. So as you can see, this is a what do we have leftover bits of? We were talking about this the other day. What do I do with leftover proteins? Well, a cassoulet might be your answer here. So for this cassoulet, I'm using some bacon, and those are skinless chicken thighs, and some kielbasa. So I've got those combination. You could certainly do this a vegetarian. If you wanted, I would start by maybe roasting some vegetables, like a Vidalia onion, get them nice and caramelized, maybe some roasted carrots, things like that, and cook it the same way. But we're gonna do a classic French meat heavy cassoulet. And then I want to add some more vegetables to mine, so I did a mirepoix. I've got carrots, onions, and celery. And since I'm here in my quarantine kitchen, when I peeled those things, I put them in my chicken stock bag that I'm saving. There's a chicken breast that I cut up the other night. Got some scrapings of the carrots and celery. That's the onion skin. So that's all living in my freezer, so when I get ready to make a chicken stock, I'm ready to go with that. And then in addition to that, I've got a little extra chicken stock, and I've got a little bit of white wine. I don't have a lot of white wine in the house, so I'm just going to use a little. And then I've got some tomato paste, and all of that's going to go into flavoring my stock. And then I can have a topping for the cassoulet. A typical topping for this would be parsley and breadcrumbs as a gratin on top, and that helps with the crust. And that crust that we're going to form is part of the low and slow cooking method that a cassoulet takes. Now, this is not, I'm going to make this quick in the Instapot, I just need a quick meal. That is not what this is. Cassoulet is a long, slow cook in the oven thing. We're going to speed it up a little bit. We're not going to take 6 hours to cook this, which is what a normal cassoulet would do. But it'll take a couple hours in the oven because it has to get a nice brown crust on top of it a couple of times. And we'll talk about that when we get into it a little bit later. So I have sauteed all of my meats, and in my pan over here I have the onion grease and the chicken grease left over. So I'm going to start off by sauteing my vegetables and then combining those with the beans. And then I'm going to start layering my meats into the pan and then layering the beans in on top of them, and then fill it up with broth, and then we're gonna bake that. So I'm gonna get that started, and then I'll stop and take a picture of it before it goes in the oven. Got my mirepoix sauteing in the bacon, chicken, and sausage grease. I can tell you right now, that smells pretty darn good. And here's my meats. Now, there's another way you can do this. You didn't have to fry them on the stovetop. You could have roasted these in a pan and put some other aromatics in with the pan and let it roast and make a nice fond on the bottom of the pan. And then when that comes out of the oven, you let it cool down, and then you deglaze that pan with some water, and that goes into your bean broth as well. So there's different ways of developing layers of flavor, and that's the brilliance of so much of French cuisine. Is they take simple ingredients and they add care and time and a lot of technique to it, and it develops these layer upon layer upon layer of flavor. And that's what we really want out of this dish. And I said earlier not to use your Instapot with this. Like I said, you can use the Instapot to get the beans to the cook point. Then take them out of the Instapot, and then we move into a roasting method. Instapot is a pressurized steam cook, and what we want now is a roasting cook that allows us to develop a nice golden brown crust and reduction of sauces to make our flavors really meld together. So that's where we are with this. We're going to let these saute a little bit longer. Get a little translucent. John, my friend John, said that recipes never say the correct amount of time to brown something. He said an onion won't cook in 3 to 5 minutes, much less caramelize. That's really true. And our onion's going to take 20 minutes to caramelize unless you do his fast cook method where you just do it on a super hot stove, which I don't recommend for the average cook to try. So this process might take me 5, 7, 10 minutes. It just kind of depends on. I've got that pan pretty full. I made some big chunky pieces of vegetables because I wanted to up my veggie content. This is going to be a one-pot meal, and it's me here by myself. I'm making a small one because it's me here by myself, but I also wanted it to be more vegetable heavy than just the beans and the meat. So with my cassoulet, I can do that if I want to. So I'm going to saute those a little bit longer, mix them with my beans, and then get that ready to add all of our stuff together. Going to add some garlic here to that. I didn't add that at first because I didn't want it to burn. And now I've got some softening going on. I can stir that in, and we'll just start adding yet another layer of flavor to my mixture. Okay, so I'm going to add my tomato paste, and I'm going to put in about a tablespoon. And I've got a little less than a half a cup of wine in there. And then I'm going to add my beans. Okay. And there's my sausage layer, another layer of beans and some more stock. All right, and there's my final layer. I topped it with the last of the beans and vegetables and then sprinkled the bacon on there. And I have that much bean stock left. And I'm going to use that because I may have to top the layer off when we get into the cooking. But I've also got this half box of chicken stock that I had in the fridge. So just to give me another layer of flavor, I'm going to go ahead and top it off right now with this chicken stock. I also added a little salt and pepper because remember I didn't put any salt when I was cooking the beans because I didn't want them to condense down and get too salty or get tough. So that's my cassoulet. That's ready to go in the oven now. It's got layers of chicken and sausage, kielbasa, and bacon and white beans that are with onions and celery and carrots and garlic and aromatics, including the bean stock and bay leaves, black peppercorns, garlic, a little Italian seasoning that was in that first batch, and then a little tomato paste and white wine to finish out the flavoring on this. So I've got my oven set for 325 degrees, and I'm going to let this cook until it's bubbling all the way through, probably about an hour. This will be the first cook. Working our way through beans today, and I'm going to make a quick white bean sage dip. This is a Tuscan white bean sage dip, and it's a pretty simple recipe. Now, you can do this with canned beans. In fact, this kind of bean dip is one of my favorite. Oh my gosh, I have guests coming, I need a quick snack to feed them. I can usually pull these ingredients out of my pantry and make this real quick. So I have roughly 15 ounces. That's about an equivalent of what would come out of a can. I cooked these. These are beans that I soaked last night and cooked up, but that's about what would come out of a can. And I cooked them in a flavorful broth to sort of an al dente. And then I'm going to use 1/4 cup of loosely packed parsley leaves. I used the stems earlier in my bouquet garni when I was cooking the beans. I'm going to add some garlic. I'm putting in 1 clove right there. You could put 2. Putting in a tablespoon of powdered sage. Sage is that flavor that you usually use with turkey around Thanksgiving, and it goes so well with these flavors with these white beans. All right, I'm going to put in a little pepper. Yes, that's pre-ground pepper, but do what you got to do. A little salt and some lemon juice. And I went into my fridge drawer, my produce drawer, and I looked for some old lemons because at this point they're only really good for juicing, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I got one of the old lemons, I juiced it, I put that in there, and then the last ingredient is going to be my olive oil. But I'm going to blend that up real quick. And this food processor has a little Drizzle hole in it, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. All right, so I've juiced a second lemon. I'm going to add that to my paste. I'm going to add just a little more salt and pepper to that mix. Okay, that's starting to look pretty smooth. I'm going to go ahead and taste that. No, needs a little more olive oil yet. This thing doesn't really put in very much at a time. Do you hear that change in the sound? That tells me that it's just hit a nudge of the consistency. And that's probably about where I want it to be. So I'm going to stop, let that blend a little while longer to get it nice and smooth, get any of the other extra lumps out. I don't want any huge chunks of garlic or anything like that. I want it to be a nice smooth paste. All right, let's try that. Oh, that's looking really good. It's nice and green with the sage and the parsley in there. Oh, that's really nice. All right. That's my cassoulet. So this is going to be better if I put it in the fridge and let it sit overnight, but I could start eating that right now. If you've got keto friends, people doing paleo, this is a nice high protein snack, good healthy fats, very little carb, and It just depends on what you put with it to eat it. So if you put celery sticks with it, or if you put bread, pita bread or something like that with it, it's going to make a difference. But this is a great way to get beans in your diet. If you've got these beans sitting around and you're in quarantine, you're like, what am I going to do with all these? These and some crackers or some celery and carrot sticks, other vegetable sticks. This is, you sit and just eat this right up. It's a very fresh taste because of that parsley. It's got a nice herbal flavor from the sage. And it's a great way to use either your canned beans or your dried beans that you're going to cook up. So this is Tuscan white bean sage dip. This is number 2 in our bean. My oven's singing a little song. All right, so that's our bean dip. So the cassoulet went in the oven around 5:30ish or so. It's now a little after 7, so we're gonna check that after an hour and a half. It should be bubbling, and it is. Doesn't it look wonderful? All right, so now we're gonna raise the temperature to 400 degrees, and we are gonna let that create a nice crust on the top. Right, there's our first crust. So we've had the oven at 400 degrees, and it's been cooking to get this nice crust on the top of it. Now, the thing to do is to break that crust up. And I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to add the breadcrumbs and parsley mixture. I've added a little salt and pepper to that too. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and because the water level, the broth level's a little low, I'm going to take some of that leftover bean stock and add just a little bit, bring that level back up. And this will soak up the fats that have collected on the top of this dish, so that should make a nice lovely topping. And we're going to go ahead and put this back in the oven and let it form another crust. Alright, so here's our second crust on the cassoulet. I'm going to go ahead and bust that up one more time. One more shot of some stock, and the third crust is it. So we're going to put this back in. It's been, oh, this oven has a tune for everything. That's the one telling me the oven door's been open too long. All right, so we're going to put this back in one more time. Next time it comes out, it's ready to go. All right, here we go. This is our cassoulet's third crust. So it is time to take it out of the oven. Go. That looks spectacular. Here we go. We've got a breadcrumb crust, and it has just kept absorbing all of that lovely liquid. And so the next step, the only thing left to do is eat some of this. All right, I'm going to plate this up because I don't want to try and hold the camera while I'm plating, and then we'll look at that. And here's our cassoulet all dished out. I've got a piece of chicken thigh and a few pieces of kielbasa. And there are the beans and carrots and celery and onion and bacon and all that. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. And I cannot wait to dig into this, but it's a little on the hot side. You can see, maybe you can see the steam coming up off of it. So I'm going to give that a second. If this completes our total time for this cassoulet, which was 3 hours. That's not from cooking the beans, that's from having the beans cooked. It took 3 hours from the start of this dish to the finish. And so that's about half the time that it would have taken in France. We should have put another 6 into developing those flavors, roasting our meats and things like that. But still, this, I can tell you, is just, the aroma coming off of this is so rich and so deep. And this is nothing like your usual bean soup that you usually make, I guarantee. So since we're home in our quarantine, you should give cassoulet a try, because you've got the time to develop all those wonderful flavors and get this beautiful, beautiful dish out on your plate. Hi everybody, we've got one more bean dish to make today, and I've got the rest of the beans. This is about 8 ounces, a cup. It's not 8 ounces because there's air in there, but a little over a cup of the cooked beans. And I cooked these a little longer because I wanted them to be just a little softer than the ones that I used for the bean dip. So I've just got the rinsed white beans right here. I've cut up some shallots, and I've got some green olives stuffed with pimentos, and I've halved some organic grape tomatoes. So I'm going to add those in. And I'm going to use something off of my spice shelf. This is called Greek seasoning. I don't know what's in it. I can taste garlic and rosemary and oregano and salt and pepper and some other stuff. But I bought this from a vendor at a fair. And so it's just labeled Greek seasoning, so I'm going to use it. I'll use about a tablespoon of that. And this is some rosemary from a plant that I had in my yard. So I'm going to add a little bit of red wine vinegar. How much did you use, they say? Tablespoon and a half or so. Just as soon as that red wine vinegar hit the Greek seasoning, I got a big aroma that just came off of this salad. And it's just really tasty smelling. All right, so now I could stop right there. I could probably adjust it a little bit for salt and pepper, although with the olives and that Greek seasoning, I think it's probably got enough. I could add some olive oil. I think I will, just because. Not even a tablespoon, just enough to kind of give it a little fat in all that. And I think that's it. I think that's all I'm going to do to that. That's a nice little simple vinaigrette, some easy seasoning, white beans, shallot, and what I had in the fridge, which in this case was some olives and some grape tomatoes. So that's my third method of preparing beans. This can be done with a can of beans. This batch I made last night. I soaked them last night. I cooked them today. I've split it into 3 different dishes. And again, this will be better tomorrow than it is tonight because it'll have a chance for all of those flavors to meld, and it'll be really wonderful. And the nice thing about a marinated salad like this is it stays nice in the fridge for days and days. So this is a great quarantine cuisine. So here we have our beans 3 ways. These all came out of the same pot of soaked white beans that I started last night. I've got my cassoulet, which is, oh my gosh, delicious, with my sausages and chicken breast and bacon and all of our wonderful vegetables. I've got my Tuscan white bean and sage dip, which has aged a couple of hours now, and it's just really developing its flavors nicely. And then I've got some white bean salad that I threw together with what was in my refrigerator, which was some shallots and some grape tomatoes and some olives, a little bit of salt and pepper and vinegar. And I tell you, now that the vinegar has had a minute to work on that Greek seasoning, I can taste more tarragon in there and other wonderful herbs. It's really going to develop nicely overnight, I can tell. So that was a really nice choice. Kind of a guess. Sometimes you look at these spice blends on your shelf and you go, gee, I don't remember what that one's supposed to taste like. Well, this is a really good way to use it and figure out what it is. The white beans love to have, mystery seasonings, and you might come out with something you really love. So here we go. Beans 3 ways. I hope this gives you some ideas to be able to do more fun things with the white beans that you've got sitting on your cabinet during our quarantine. Have a happy quarantine, everybody. Good night.